Happy to welcome our guest, Dr. Piotr Kuligowski, who works for the big historical institute in Warsaw, co-sponsored by the Polish equivalent, if I may take at liberty, of our FPO or FNRS. He's a full-time researcher who has published already several books and received several prizes for his work on politics, sovereignty, representation in the 18th and 19th century. As the students might remember from the first year, the constitutional and institutional organization of Poland is a fascinating topic of legal history. There used to be a construction called the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the Ancien Regime, with an elected monarch, which was something seen as very weird by the European powers, where they tried to bribe as many nobles that they could to get their own candidate, the French and Austrian, the Russian one, etc. But Poland also had a very progressive constitution in the early 1790s, about around the time that we had the Revolution of Brabant and the French Revolution, which makes it a very interesting case. The Polish Revolt of 1830 is also at the same moment as our own revolution in Belgium, and is not without conceptual and human connections to that one. Dr. Kuligowski has already spent a couple of months in Belgium before, and takes Belgium as one of the possible cases of comparison in his fascinating research project. He will now have the opportunity to speak to us for about 45 minutes, after which we have the opportunity to engage in a Q&A. So if there's anything, for instance, that the students don't understand, please feel free to ask a brief explanation during the expose. That is also perfectly possible. But so I thank you for being very numerous in this room. If I had known beforehand that we would be more than 8, I would have looked for another one. But still, we have the company of the books, and it doesn't to fit in here. So, Piotr, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Frederick, and thank you all for coming, for being here. I'm really excited for this, having this possibility to present my ongoing project, which is devoted to views of Belgian and Polish representatives in this post-Vienna Europe on two interrelated concepts, or even intellectual questions: sovereignty and representation. One disclaimer, my crucial background is history of ideas and ideology studies, but I am this type of the historian of ideas that decided not to focus longer on these sophisticated treaties written by individuals, but rather to look at the collectively, deliberatively produced political discourse as was a result of deliberations of political assemblies. So it is why I decided to begin this project. The project started last year, so I still have a time to dig deeper, to broader my source base, and generally for reflection. The crucial result of the project is supposed to be an English monograph that I hope at some point it will be published. Like this. How could I change? Oh, yes, now. So the structure of my presentation will be rather formal, so I decided not to focus specifically on any aspect of my current research or project, but rather to give you a sense of very general frames of my project, research questions, and some very fresh examples of certain findings from my ongoing research. So I will start from the project description, discussing research questions, sources, and then I will say several words about how the definition of these concepts and the ways they were used in the past evolved in the period of the post-Vienna in the post-Vienna period, focusing on both Belgian and Polish representatives' discourse. So it is a group project that I have financed by the Polish National Science Center, which is crucial grant agency in Poland. And what justifies the selection of cases? Some of these points were already raised by Frederick. I would like to add several other points. So both were Catholic societies with religion occupying like important place in discourse of representatives. For instance, when I was looking at Handelinger from the Tweede Kamer, the lower chamber of the Estates General of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, I noted that in speeches delivered by representatives from the southern Netherlands, the word religion occurred four times more often than from the representatives in the north, Godsdienst. So it means that questions related to religion were important for them as a part of the public activity, and also for the Polish representatives, it was part of the not only religion but also political identity. Both countries at that period I interpret as situated in this sort of European interface regions, following the category as proposed by a political scientist, Stein Rokan, that I found useful in working on the Polish history, but also I think for Belgium it is useful, as these countries that were exposed to both influences coming from and also direct interventions by neighbors, by empires, like in the Belgian case, it is chiefly France, and on the other hand, the northern Netherlands and Germany, while Poland at that period, as Frederick mentioned, after partitions that occurred in the second half of the 18th century, became a part of three European empires, namely Russian Empire, Prussian Empire, and Austrian Empire, Habsburg monarchy, which really made these regions as being situated in these specific zones at the crossroads of various empires. Also, what I think is interesting in this regard is also this sort of self-identity, like Poles created this discourse of bulwark of Europe, or the stronghold, or the place which in which Latin civilization, Western civilization, Catholic religion is defended against impulses coming from the East, coming from Asia. I think it also existed in the identity of Belgium and the Netherlands, like the British diplomats, and the perspective that the country should be a buffer zone against possible French imperialism that was still considered as a threat after the Napoleonic period. Related to that is the influence of political thought and political culture coming from France, especially nascent liberalism, like theories of doctrinaire, and also the strategy of the French opposition that they applied. Like, for instance, in Warsaw, it was quite popular among first Polish liberals that were representatives in the Sejm. Which is the native term for representative assembly, that they tried to deviate from the topic that was discussed to include into the frame of debate some topics, some issues that were possibly very problematic and critical towards authorities. That was the strategy which they perceived as being inspired by the action and political behavior of this French liberal opposition. Then, during the period, during the late 18th century, in both countries occurred interesting aspects of transforming the political situation, like the Brabant Revolution of 1790, which resulted in a short-living experiment with United States of Belgium, and also in Poland there was an attempt to implement the modern constitutional system, which was also short-lived, and it resulted in the partitions. In 1795, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth ceased to exist after the first, second, and third final partition, and also Belgium became a part of France at that period of time. Once again, 1815, it is the moment in which, as a result of the Congress of Vienna provisions, the political situation of both countries were changed. Like we have the establishment of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, which was characterized by, for instance, only Piren as a political amalgam of two various cultures, orders, languages, people who cannot understand each other. And also in Poland, this Congress of Vienna resulted in completely new situation. According to the final act of the Congress, in each parts of the old Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth were to be established representative assemblies, but the same provision stated that it is up to monarchs to decide about actual forms of these assemblies. So they use this right to really curtail any political influences and real power that these assemblies could possess. And last but not least, 1830, once again, the new wave of European revolutions being a fresh challenge to this newly established international order, like brought about, first of all, the July Revolution, trois glorious days, 3 glorious days in France. Then the situation in Brussels riots after the opera La Muette de Portici, when the actor said "Amour sacré de la patrie" and the crowd reacted vividly. And also in Poland, 29 November 1830, the outbreak of the November uprising against the Russian Empire, being a result of the long-lasting constitutional crisis. Like here? Here?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So as I mentioned, in Poland at that period existed several representative assemblies, which was broadly speaking in line with the provisions of the Congress of Vienna. First of all, there was established a political entity such as the Grand Duchy of Posen, being a part of the Prussian and later German Empire, with the political assembly in Poznań. There was the Kingdom of Galicia and Lodomeria with political assembly in Lviv or Lemberg. Free City of Krakow, that was quite interesting situation. That was free city established under the umbrella of both Prussia, Russia, and Austria. So it was also the inter-imperial assembly trying to navigate between these three powers. Then the most important one was the Sejm, so the political assembly in Warsaw, being established according to the constitutional provisions introduced in the Kingdom of Poland. And here, a little bit in the northwest, there was during the last days of the November uprising, as Warsaw was already taken by Russian troops, they evacuated the assembly to the monastery in Zakroczym. So recent sessions took place also in this new setting, while assemblies, as I examine concerning to activity and political discourse of Belgian representatives, obviously in the Hague and in Brussels at that period of time. So first of all, during the period of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, that was the rotating assembly, once proceeding in Brussels, once in Hague. First session took place in Brussels. Then the National Congress during the Revolution, and also after establishing of independent states, also in Brussels. So my research questions are chiefly related to the history of concepts and intellectual history. So it means that I don't intend to impose any normative definition of sovereignty and representation. Rather, I am interested in the ways how they were expressed and reinterpreted and used in particular debates and particular arguments formulated by representatives in these selected assemblies which offer good insight into the mindset of political elites from that time. I also wanted to stress that I focus on lower chambers as being associated with the proper national representation of that time. So the crucial question would be how they perceived their roles in these both interfaces in post-Vienna periods, in the period of post-Vienna political transformations that occurred in Europe. And it is worth stressing that these both concepts, sovereignty and representation, seldom were used directly verbatim in various interventions and speeches and protocols. Rather, they were used in different occasions. For instance, when representatives wanted to talk in the name of the nation, in the name of a state, in the name of region, city, and so on and so forth. So they emerged chiefly in these protocols from proceedings as parts of various debates concerning questions such as, for instance, borders. Like in Poland, there were considerations about the borders, which were constructed in a way that allowed, for instance, the leakage of capital from the Polish provinces at that period of time. Exercise of power and who possesses the power within these systems, and also the role of representatives, how they perceived their own role and how they shaped their identities and perspectives of society. So, for instance, the question whether they would like to represent the society as a whole, or perhaps some specific group or a state. So there were quite many arguments related to this claim that we are a national representation, or we represent some region or country, so we can or we cannot do something. We demand or we don't demand something because of the fact that we are national representation. My sources are chiefly protocols from proceedings of these political assemblies that I mentioned, and here this type of sources is problematic for several reasons, especially because of the fact that at that period there was not any standardized manner to prepare these proceedings. So the methods of preparing them was different in various countries and also among various assemblies. But still, I perceive them as a very valuable sources, as they were produced amidst this specific situation of communication among representatives. And their construction reflects various factors. First of all, technical possibilities. So, for instance, stenography in a nascent phase at that period of time that made virtually not possible to prepare very accurate protocols, like those who like British literature could read Charles Dickens and his statement that being a parliamentary recorder was more complicated than learning 6 foreign languages for this person. So it is really something that influenced strongly on the construction of the protocol. Poor acoustics sometimes was also problematic, or in the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, and for instance also in Poznań, differences in languages. So speeches were delivered in 2 languages, like for Poznań, Polish, German; for United Kingdom of Netherlands, Dutch and French, and sometimes representatives could not understand each other. Political arrangements, like for instance in Warsaw, that was a censorship. The question of publicity, secrecy of proceedings, so whether, for instance, visitors could come, sit in the galleries and listen to speakers or not. It also influenced on the proceedings. The political culture, like for instance, debates over what should be reports, like elements like cheering, booing, clapping hands, if they are in line with the honor and dignity of this chamber. So perhaps they should be excluded because they are proof that there emerged some emotions in the chamber in which only cold reason should prevail over this type of emotions. So also political culture exerted an influence over the construction of the protocols. And also I use various supplementary sources to understand better what was going on in the chamber, like chiefly, obviously, legal acts regulating these institutions, daily press. In some cases, there are, for instance, different methods in which protocols reported given session, and also what was reported or mentioned by journalists in the press. Speeches, sometimes they were printed as separate leaflets by various representatives. Also, in some cases, if a speech was related in a very short way or not at all, there are in some cases also as notes, manuscripts preserved in the archives, which I also try to include. Memoirs of various MPs, also very important source, and in some cases police reports referring, for instance, to the Kingdom of Poland, and various stories of Russian secret police trying to sneak in the galleries and listen what was going on. They are written in a very bad French, and anyway, in some cases, there are more accurate and more details than official protocols, because they include everything, every emotions, situations that were going on, and so on and so forth. Beginning from these two constitutional monarchies, I focus on the lower chamber of the Sejm, so parliament in Warsaw, that according to the constitutional provisions, that constitution was implemented by the Tsar Alexander I in 1815. Sejm was to convene with the participation of the public every 2 years, but in fact there were only 4 conventions between 1815 and 1830. Many of representatives had political experience from the period of the Duchy of Warsaw, which was a Napoleonic puppet state established in Central Europe. Some of them also in the last years of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, like they were, for instance, those who voted in favor of implementing the Constitution 1791. So these kind of experiences resonated and influenced in various ways on the ways how they debated political matters with references to these older political traditions. While concerning the Belgian part in this period, I focus on representatives of the southern provinces that took seats in Tweede Kamer, lower chamber of General Estates. There was 110 seats for representatives, half of them for the South, which rapidly resulted in structural imbalance within the country, because southern provinces were populated, like the number of inhabitants was higher.
So Belgium had a higher population.
Yes, at that period. And it rapidly resulted in this structural imbalance. So from the very beginning, those representatives from the South expressed various concerns related to underrepresenting of southern provinces in these general estates. As I mentioned, proceedings were both in Dutch and in French, and they reveal the cleavage of various languages, cultures, mindsets of these representatives. And also for Belgium, many of them had this political experience gained during the French period, some of them being even members of the Assemblée Nationale during this period. And to provide some quotes illustrating these interesting tendencies, I can mention for Warsaw Augustyn Słubicki, who expressed openly from the tribune that the crucial duty of representatives is to care about constitutional provisions. Interestingly, it is one of those excerpts that are not mentioned in formal protocols, but only reported by press. While Louis Augustin Ruffin expressed also very early as 1816, that there are 2 different political orientations and cultures that met in one representative assembly. And as Refrain mentioned, it was never, it did not happen previously in any other country. So this kind of concern was expressed very early by representatives from the South. I focused on constitutional systems. Now I would like to say some words about the phenomenon I called pocket assemblies. So this kind of representative bodies established as representatives of regions within empires, being at the same time related to, or having this sort of identity related to the bigger national entity, in this case the Polish one. So there was 3 assemblies in Poznań, Lviv, Lemberg, and Krakow. First of all, the Sejm of the Grand Duchy of Poznań was established amidst this wave of reforms that occurred in the Prussian state at that period of time. And the decision was made to introduce provincial Landtage, so this sort of provincial assemblies that were to represent the voice of provinces before the king, obviously via intermediary instance. They operated behind closed doors, and this situation was supported by Polish representatives. They were in favor of excluding the public from the chamber. They voted in favor of that when there was the proposition to allow the public to participate, to listen to proceedings. And there were 7 sessions in the period that interests me. Then the Galician estates in Lviv. In the picture, you can see the specific uniform they were wearing during the sessions. It was also quite interesting assembly because, for instance, there was not any. The number of representatives were not predetermined in advance, so it really depended on how many of those who were granted the permission to represent came to the session and wanted to join. And the sessions formally lasted only 5 days, but in fact they were longer because before the formal opening of the first session, there was a ceremonial. There was this ceremony of opening the convention, and during this ceremony, which was also a big party in the city, representatives made crucial decisions that during the formal proceedings they only proclaimed them. And last but not least, the same of the Free City of Krakow. It was also interesting institutions operating in a very intensive way. So 20 conventions during this period, also established similarly to the same in Warsaw according to the constitutional provisions, because the Free City of Krakow was granted the constitution, and this constitution became also a part of self-identity of representatives. So in various occasions, when, for instance, addressing some concerns to the ruling monarchs from neighboring empires, they related to the fact that we are representatives according to the constitution. So it is our law that we can demand something or make some more daring motion related to the issue that was at that period debated. And these assemblies were far from being considered as modern parliaments, and even it is not very clearly that they really expressed the democratization impulses at that period of time, because for some of representatives, this kind of semi-closed assembly representing only the voice of elites was also the part of the personal dignity and honor. There were also various ways of preparing protocols, like, for instance, from the Grand Duchy of Poznań, there were bilingual protocols prepared both in German and Polish, while for instance for Krakow there are only manuscripts that are stored in the archive, so there is also complicated way how to work effectively on this type of sources. Unfortunately, Transcribus doesn't work very well for Polish language from that period, so I searched for alternative methods. And as I mentioned, these assemblies were far from being democratic or even expressing the willingness to become democratic. And here is the good excerpt from Jabłonowski, Ludwik Jabłonowski, who took a seat as a representative in Lviv, while in his memoirs from later periods, from the period of dualism that emerged in Habsburg monarchy in the second half of the 19th century, in which also Krakow became the autonomous and the Kingdom of Galicia became autonomous state. Jabłonowski still expressed that he favored the previous embodiment of representation in Lviv because it was not influenced at all by Jews, peasants, and Orthodox priests, in contradiction to this assembly that existed in the second half of the 19th century. Important moments, as I mentioned, for the project and for my research are the revolutions 1830-31. In the picture, there is a part of the president button of the button of the president of the Warsaw Sejm, so with this eagle and sphere or globe. And at that period of time, assemblies both in Brussels and Warsaw proceeded intensively, producing several volumes of protocols. For Brussels, there is 5 volumes for Warsaw, 6. And what is interesting in comparison to these previous protocols is the fact that they were more emotional and discussing much more abstract issues, with more, in some cases, these debates were more theoretically sophisticated, so they're even more interesting for historians of ideas like me, searching for some original statements made by representatives. And also here, the role of visitors and public gatherings in the assemblies was very important. Like, for instance, in Warsaw, at the moment in which they voted for the position of the Nicholas I, there is the story that they began voting after ladies that gathered in galleries began to demand this motion, encouraging representatives to vote in favor of the deposition of Nicholas I from the Polish throne. However, there is also the divergence in this story, namely the Warsaw Sejm, after the outbreak of the uprising, found itself rapidly in the deep crisis of legitimization, and frankly speaking, they didn't find a way. They didn't find a way how to improve their own position within this ongoing processes, chiefly because of the fact that those who were elected as MPs before the uprising remained on their seats, and many of them represented more moderate position towards this new situation. For instance, there was the debates if the uprising is only to restore the provisions of the Congress of Vienna and constitutional arrangements, or rather it is in favor of restitution of the old Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. That was the disputes, and they never managed to find a coherent proposition that they could offer for the wider public. While the National Congress in this regard acted as a catalyst of revolution, and that is also interesting novelty. Like in the protocols, also reactions from the audience are noted after speeches. We can find how galleries, how visitors reacted. It is very interesting when I looked at also at the protocols from France, 1850, to Archives Parlementaires, and I realized that there they reported only very short summaries of speeches, even not speeches verbatim, not at all reactions. So it is really like a change that occurred also in the construction of these protocols. Also, there is the difference in self-characteristics, like in the Congress National, it was a widespread way to refer to the Belgian people, like in the name of the Belgian people, we make this decision, we open the session, we adjourn session, we vote in for or against some motion. While the first sentence of the protocols from Warsaw from that period is that the provincial government, due to recent events, convinced MPs to Warsaw. So it was not established in the name of the people, but rather according to the will of the ministers and according to the decision made by the provisional government. In both assemblies, the source of dignity, but also source of some fears that occurred at that period were the moments of dethronement of both monarchs and also the prohibition of their families for the future ascension to the throne. And here, in both cases, they were explained as acts fulfilling the will of the nation. But also in this regard, we can notice interesting difference. Like, for instance, in the speech delivered by Jean-Baptiste Nothomb, who was one of the leaders of Belgian liberals at that period, he perceived the revolution also as a moment in which the national representatives might annul the acts of the provisions of the acts of the Congress of Vienna, while Polish representatives rather were more moderate in this regard, and they were convinced that actually there is the opposite, that it was Nicholas I who had broken these provisions, and the revolution is only to restore the final act of the Congress of Vienna in their legal, strict sense. What is interesting to look to the protocols after the revolution is how Belgian representatives tried to define this new situation, how they tried to imagine and engage in this statecraft after the revolution. And what I found interesting was that there was a strong presence of the constant fear of morcellement, so partitions that could occur in this for this recently established independent state, and also how they tried to overcome all regional or local identities in order to represent unitarian state. And there are some interesting quotations from debates on various things in which the questions of sovereignty and representations might be noted, like, for instance, Jean-Baptiste Nothomb, when there was a debate about the financing for the Ministry of International Affairs, he was convinced that when the ministry, as he said, falling apart, it is also the question having wider implications on the social system. Also very interesting in this regard is the debate on the ways how to construct, and if the railway system should be constructed in Belgium, if so, in what way. in these debates also emerged these sort of claims related to regions, like when they were debating about the route for this railway that would be the most favorable, and also various fears related to that. For instance, the constant fear that Holland might attract merchants more than Belgium. So it was still perceived as a country that is potentially dangerous for the newly established Belgium. And one of the final arguments that occurred during this debate was that we should vote in favor if we would like to prove that we deserve for the independent state for constructing of railway system. So I think these questions were like really something in constant flux, depending on the context in which they were used. While Polish representative bodies, after the collapse of the November uprising that occurred in 1851, they resumed operations only 2 years after the uprising. So they all were halted both in Poznań, Lviv, and Krakow. And also in all of them, there were some changes that were directed at making their position even less potent than before. So all the empires reacted in such a way that they tried to harness even more these representative bodies. It is why representatives who found themselves in exile after the uprising, they were considering establishing the same in exile, but in fact they never succeed because of the fact that the disputes among them arose about who is to be blamed for the failure of the uprising. And despite of the fact that these pocket assemblies were even less important within the political systems than before the uprising, they were still considered as being truly national representations by the public opinion. For instance, by journalists reporting various sessions or mentioning that the session will took place in these and these days. They referred quite consistently to them as the properly national representations, and they also outlined that even if these forums are not fully in line with our demands and our imagination of how representative bodies should operate and how it should be organized, they are still worthy to care about because of the fact that that is the only representations that we have. And all of them were dissolved finally on the verge of the spring of nations, that in fact in Poland occurred earlier than in many parts of Europe, because already in 1836 there were attempts to begin new insurrections, and after that these movements were very short-living and led rapidly to the failure. After that, these assemblies in Poznań, Krakow, and Lviv also were dissolved, similarly as the same in Warsaw after the collapse of the November uprising. The last photo at the end, on the left, there is the picture of the royal castle in which the Warsaw Sejm proceeded that period after the Warsaw Uprising 1944, but in fact it is also a good metaphor of what happened at that period that interests me, because after the failure of the November Uprising, Nicholas I decided in fact to demolish the chamber in which they operated, and there was the reconstruction of this place. It was divided into smaller rooms, also symbolically to prove that there will never again this will be never again any Polish-speaking representative assembly proceeding in this place. While on the right side there is the Chamber of Representatives under reconstruction. So it is also, I think, some nice metaphor of political processes I try to understand. Thank you for your attention. I am very open to your questions.
I'm going to interrupt the recording here. We have the exquisite company online of our colleague Raphael Kein, who is also, of course,